I'm your host, Rajesh Kaishap, and welcome to the Lalita Sharma Show, the most popular radio debate show in the city. As every day, it is important to say thanks to the huge traffic problems Bogota faces. Without them, we couldn't be this popular at all. Today, Wednesday, that means the topic needs to be strictly related to food. Perhaps we could build up the 50 list of best fast food restaurants of the city. But today I have invited two very special guests to talk about Chinese food. Not precisely sushi or noodles, but the actual situation regarding China's food economy. More precisely, we want to know who will feed China. Good evening, Mr. Ramirez. Good evening, Mr. Leva. Please introduce yourselves. Good morning, Mr. Rahesh. It's quite a pleasure to be here. I'm surprised by the high amount of listeners this program has achieved. I think I have never been heard by such a huge audience. Well, I'm Sergio Ramirez, and I'm a specialized anthropologist in society, feeding conditions, and behaviors. And let's see if we can get clear conclusions from the current Chinese situation.
Good evening, Mr. Ramirez. Good morning, Mr. Rajesh. I am Sebastian Leiva and I have brought knowledge about market behavior and food demand increases in the world. Is it a pleasure to be here? As the other guest, I'm willing to get some satisfying conclusions in this program.
It is also a pleasure for us to have you both in our program. Why don't we start talking about how is the actual situation of food trade and production in the world? I'll provide a bit of context for our audience. Throughout history, China has been recognized as a very important country in terms of politics, economy, and culture. Modern history has shown us that China has played an important role in the world economy. China's population occupies one-fifth of the world's total population. The fact gives this country a lot of relevance and is the main reason why it has been analyzed today. Yes, Rajesh, it is important to understand the role of China in the modern world, especially because of the influence of this country in economy, global economy.
I agree. This is a topic that concerns all of us.
Okay, first we are going to start talking about China's increase in the population in the last decade. As you both know, China is a big country that it is increasing its population every time more. The increment of population and the scarcity of the resources was first introduced by Malthus in 1798. Now we are seeing the theory coming to life in the case of modern China. Mr. Leiva, what do you think about this?
Malthus said was that global population grows in an exponential way, while food production grows in a linear way. This means that food supply would not be enough for all people on the earth. What are looking at China is somehow related. China's population is growing in an exponential way. There is too much people in China. This country has become one of the largest consumers of pork, beef, rice, wheat, and soybean meal according to Lester. So the question is, how will all those people be feeded?
Ramirez, do you have something to say about this? Well, true. China's growth population is a subject of a concern of all of us. In fact, accelerated growth of the population of the whole world is also something we all should have present. However, when talking about the Malthusian theory, we must take into account that he didn't have considered the advantages of technology that had made possible food production to keep pace with population growth rate. Concerning Malthus, he also started a positive and preventive check regulated by the population growth. To talk about China, we have to take into account the country's one-child policy, even though it has been flexible in the latest years. This measure has regulated China's population. One-child policy obligated each family to have just one kid. According to Malthus, this is a preventive check which purposes to regulate population growth rate. Mr. Ramirez, but does these checks are enough to regulate China's population? Well, Rajesh, this is a measure that certainly has helped to reduce China's population growth. However, this doesn't solve the problem. China's population is still one-fifth of the world's and it tends to be increasing. Did you know that during the most harsh times of the one-child policy, the population registered an increase? Perhaps not a linear or exponential one, but it kept growing. So we come back to what Mr. Leiva brought in discussion. How will China feed all these people? Mr. Leiva?
Yes, this brings something else to the debate. As the Observatory of Economic Complexity data states, China exports the equivalent of 2.37% of its GDP in animal and vegetable products, and other foodstuff. However, it imports the equivalent of 3.46% on its GDP. This supports the fact that despite of having 56% of its land dedicated to agriculture, it cannot feed itself and it depends on other countries to do so. This is why between 2007 and 2008, food prices around the world increased sharply just because Chinese consumers were able to buy more food, which increased the overall demand.
The crisis of 2007-2008 prices dramatically changed around the world, and concern about determinants of food prices arose. Indeed, as it was mentioned before, pork consumption with beef are growing at a phenomenal rate in China, and the country is as well considered the largest consumer of rice, wheat, and soybean meal. With the previous information, there is no doubt that China has no actual desire to be self-sufficient, despite the amount of agricultural labor. Nevertheless, I consider China has more influence in the global panorama, not being self-sufficient. Well, we have different positions in this point. Leiba, would you like to reinforce the idea of China trying to be self-sufficient in the agricultural area? And Ramirez, I would like you to develop this idea about China's influence in the global panorama.
Yes, I understand Ramirez's point of view, but it's important to understand that China is trying to be self-sufficient by the agricultural activity. In the meantime, it has to maintain the other activities and food requirements the country needs, so imports happen. That is how my point of view and Ramirez's points of view can happen together.
Rajesh, I would like to turn the panorama a bit in this point. China wanted to be self-sufficient, and this brought a clear consequence. In long terms, that is actual the amount of land dedicated to this activity. Nevertheless, nowadays the country's ambition has changed and they are no longer interested in self-sufficiency. This is precisely linked to China's influence in the global context. They cannot change from one day to another the land dedicated to agriculture, but they can start being leaders in imports. This relation between the exports and imports China is carrying out gives the country a really big power in the international arena. As everybody knows and realizes when buying most of your clothes, China has a vast semi-industrial economy that requires labor and raw materials provided by peripheral or semi-peripheral countries. So, if China reduces imports of these raw materials of labor, it will affect this country's situation and will change the market situation. On the other hand, if China keeps industrialization in an increasing way, the country is going to require even more imports that will perhaps change the prices in international commerce and reduce agricultural functions of land. The important here thing is the influence China has over the global economy, perhaps not changing anything directly in the countries, but taking decisions for their own country. So thank you very much to each of you. I think we have arrived to two big conclusions. The first one is that China will need to respond to this food problem they are facing nowadays. It could happen by these two options, being self-sufficient in the agricultural land or perhaps continue his importing conduct. Anyways, we have to assume the second big conclusion, and that is that China has a very influential position in terms of world economy. Perhaps it will change country situation with one just decision. Do I import this product? Do I export this product? Do I really need this product? Thank you very much to all our listeners, and we'll talk tomorrow again.